Hey guys, just before the video starts, just a quick notice from me. A huge thanks to Bloomie Design for letting me use his awesome concept art for the Aston Martin 2021 car in my thumbnail. All his links will be in the description. Massive thank you, buddy. I hope you enjoy the video. Welcome back everyone to the weekly mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about absolutely anything you would like, motorsports based or not, if you really don't fancy it. I choose 5 of the best from social media, so your Twitters, your Instagrams, or in the comment section down below. So if you've got a question for next week, feel free to ask away, but without further ado, let's jump into question 1, which this week comes from Instagram, _Dan Castell _ will Aston Martin make their own engines in the future, their own power unit in the future? Thank you for your question, Dan, a fellow Dan. I'm not too sure, if I'm being totally honest. I'm not too sure. At the moment, if you're not aware, over the last week we've had the news that Aston Martin are joining forces with the current Racing Point team, and the Racing Point team will become Aston Martin in 2021. So not this season, they're going to remain the Pink Panthers very likely in 2020, but the following year Aston Martin are coming on board, thanks to Lawrence Stroll buying out Aston Martin. And actually it's that deal with Lawrence Stroll having to, invest so much money. Was it over $500 million as his consortium? And I think Lawrence Stroll himself invested $182 million into the Aston Martin company. So obviously things aren't going great for the British supercar manufacturer. That's very clear in my eyes. So in the short term, to me, it doesn't make sense to be pumping so much money into producing a Formula 1 engine, whilst at the moment, they've currently got a Mercedes engine. Mercedes in the past have worked with Aston Martin, so I don't really see that deal changing. I also don't see Mercedes dropping right to the back with the worst power unit on the grid. So for me, it makes sense for Aston to continue with Mercedes engines. Of course, if Aston suddenly jump to the front of the field in a few years' time, Mercedes might have a few question marks. But Mercedes themselves have already got question marks whether they're going to stay or go. I said last week, I don't think they're going anytime soon. But if a competitor has the same engine, they might not consider renewing the deal. I don't think it's too sensible at the moment for Aston to make their own engine. But hey, if they're winning championships year on year, they might consider it. Especially if, let's say, 8 years down the line, we swap the engines completely. A completely new type of engine, whether that's electric. I don't think it'll be electric just yet. But whether we have some other kind of hybrid power unit and there's a whole new engine revolution like we saw in 2014, they might do it then. But I currently think it's quite unlikely. Don't worry. That's not our last question on Aston Martin today. So many questions on Aston, so I had to try and shift through some of them. So sorry if I've missed your questions out, because I know that was a huge piece of news, but we can't have a whole episode talking about Aston Martin. Well, we probably could have, but not everyone's that interested. I am. I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, question 2 comes from Nicholas P over in the YouTube comments on last week's episode, and he asks, do you think there will be rookies in 2021 or only experienced drivers for the new regulations? This is something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind a little bit over, well, kind of during 2019 when some of the teams were opting to play it safe with their driver lineups. I'm looking at my boys Haas in particular, keeping Magnussen and Grosjean. I kind of feel both of them could have been moved on, but I also feel that, especially, I hate to say it, in the case of Grosjean, they wanted to keep him for 2020 just to keep that consistency and to help the team grow and understand the car. And I kind of think they might do the same in 2021. And I look at teams like Williams. They've got 2 young drivers. If Latifi doesn't perform, do they want to bring in another rookie for 2021? I'm not really too sure. AlphaTauri might be a little bit different. However, we've spoken length over the course of the winter. That there's no real Max Verstappen-esque young drivers coming through that Red Bull young driver system at the moment. There's Yuki Tsunoda in Formula 2 next year, so he really could prove to be a special driver. He did okay in F3 last year, and we've also got Yuri Vips going over to Japanese Super Formula, which is where Pierre Gasly went before he moved into Formula 1. So potentially one of those two could make the step up to Formula 1, but I think the more likely spaces for rookies is Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen, quite likely to retire. Will Giovinazzi stay? I'm not too sure. And with Ferrari having 5 young drivers in F2 next year, and again, I will shut up about this because I'm always talking about Ferrari young drivers in F2, but I really think they've got some special drivers there next year. Robbo Schwartzman, Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, I think to be honest, any of the 5, except DeLacy probably. So those 3 I just mentioned and Marcus Armstrong, probably any of those 4, could end up in Formula 1 in 2021. So Alfa Romeo, I think we could see some rookies, but I do think that a Nico Hülkenberg, someone with that bit of experience, might be a little bit more desirable, I think. But it's an interesting one. It is, because it is a completely new set of regulations. But yeah, I think experience is probably what I would go for. But then again, it's a whole new set of regulations. Why not take the gamble? It might be worth it. Lots to think about. And again, it's all to do with a team-to-team basis. But I would definitely say expect rookies at Alfa Romeo. And yeah, I think we might see at least one at AlphaTauri. Question number 3 comes from Jonah HDE, is how I'm going to kind of pronounce it, and this is a very me question, so well done. It has been picked for today's episode. I won't spend too long on it, don't worry. What helmet designs are you most looking forward to for the 2020 Formula 1 season? All of them. Absolutely all of them. And I'm not joking when I say I'm probably more looking forward to that than the car designs themselves. I'm just silly like that. Of course, I'm going to be looking out for my boy Romain Grosjean. That's going to be happening. But, I mean, most drivers nowadays often keep very similar kind of helmet designs. Hamilton's doesn't change that much year on year. Vettel's likewise. Verstappen's mixed it up over the last few years. And although Red Bull kind of tried to keep it a little bit more uniform than most teams, Verstappen's and Albon's helmets last year were very nice indeed. So I'm looking forward to see what those two do with their limitations. Norris, I loved his helmet design last year. I think that could look really good once again this year. Carlos Sainz likewise. Kimi Raikkonen, a little bit out there. But Daniel Ricciardo, how can I forget Daniel Ricciardo? His helmet last year was so out of the box. I loved it. And I expect a similar kind of thing this year. Not in terms of design, but just a complete wacky helmet. And I think it's going to look great. But in all honesty, almost every single driver I'm really interested to see. And actually, you know what? I think the ones I'm most looking forward to are going to be the 2 AlphaTauri boys. Because we don't really know how much Red Bull branding is going to be within that team. Whether it's going to be just the normal Red Bull logo, whether it's going to be the actual AlphaTauri logo, whether the helmets are going to have to be specified like Racing Point have done. So for Racing Point, the helmets have to have majority pink in the helmet. That was not the best English, but you kind of get the vibe I'm going for. And I wonder if AlphaTauri might be a similar kind of thing. So a few black helmets on the grid, that we could have some good designs there. So yeah, the 2 AlphaTauri boys, I think, Kvyat and Gasly, you've got me started now. I'd best move on, but yeah, looking forward to that next week indeed. Question 4 comes from YouTube once again. Spiros K is how I'm going to pronounce this one. When do you think Williams will be able to challenge the midfield? Serious Williams question. We don't have those very often, sadly. I think for Williams, of course, 2021 is going to be a fantastic opportunity for them to try and close up. There's no denying it's not been great over the last few years, and you would expect that trend to continue this season. It's harder to get worse, but then they've done that over the last few years, so it's not impossible. 2021, if it doesn't go well, It's so difficult to tell because they've got a solid engine there. They've got a really special driver in George Russell, so something behind the scenes just isn't working, isn't clicking, whether that's team management, whether that's personnel, just team ethos, morale, I don't really know. And it's going to be so hard to tell unless you're actually behind those closed doors and within the Williams team. But historically, they've been able to bounce back from some really awful seasons. When they bounced back in 2014, that was almost out of nowhere. Although they got that win in 2012, that win itself was just completely out of nowhere after several seasons of being almost at the back of the grid. So if any team's going to do it, to be able to get out of a rut like this, you would kind of expect Williams to be that team. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be light at the end of the tunnel, but it's Formula One and things can change around very, very quickly. If I was going to put money on it, not for a while, but I do expect them to be a team that's going to really focus on 2021 straight away. Almost throw 2020 in the bin. Maybe already they've thrown it in the bin. They're doing their car launch online, which already isn't sending the best of vibes out there to the fans. But 2021, I'm kind of optimistic for Williams. I don't think they'll be at the back of the grid. So yeah, we'll say 2021. We'll be optimistic. And our final question comes from Banger 14, I think is how we're going to go with that one. Audience participation, I should probably mention. Question 5, if you're new around here. Question 5, our final question. I like to spin it and throw it back to you guys. So I'll give you my quick thoughts. But in the comments, I'd love to know your answer as well. And this one, we're going back to Aston Martin. It's a little bit of fun. If you were Lawrence Stroll and didn't have a son to keep in the team forever, yes, that would be interesting. What would be your dream Aston Martin Formula One team lineup? 2 drivers, 1 team principal, 1 test and reserve driver, and 1 young driver. There's a lot of drivers there, and I don't want to be here forever, so I'm just going to cut this down to 2 drivers, a team principal, and a young driver. You know, test and reserve, it's pretty much similar. So I'm just going to go with that as a young driver. Team principal, I actually think Otmar has done a really good job at Racing Point over the last couple of seasons. He's been there much longer than that, but finally getting that team principal role, they're just a team that have always punched above their weight. And I'd love to see someone like him from humble beginnings, someone who a lot of people don't expect magical things. I'd love to see him given the chance at a top team. So I'm actually going to go Otmar Zafnauer, just to continue with the team. Pretty straightforward answer. I know a lot of you, Toto Wolff, maybe if Mercedes leave, that would be a sensible option as well. Bring back Ross Brawn, that would be cool. I don't think he's going to leave his position at Formula One, but potential there. 2 drivers, I'm also going to be boring and keep Sergio Perez. A little bit like Otmar Zafnauer, I'd just love to see Perez. He's put so much into this team, especially last year when they went into administration. He's been part of the journey since 2014. And if the team, in my head, I'm kind of expecting them to jump to the front in this theoretical universe. I'd just love to see him finally get that chance at a top team and for it to be his last couple of seasons in F1. A little bit like we saw with Mark Webber. Just eventually get there, and perhaps it's a little bit too late, but he can still prove his talent, get a couple of victories. So I'm going to keep Sergio Perez, although sometimes I think his driving is a little bit over the edge. I think he deserves that chance, and I think he's definitely bossed the midfield long enough to be able to warrant the chance. Second driver, again, I mean, for Racing Point, or Aston Martin as we're now calling them, a Hamilton or a Verstappen would be great. Are they going to jump to that team? Maybe a bit more unrealistic. We could bring in a Bottas, but I want that bit of flair, bit of fire within the team. So I'm going to steal George Russell from Williams, a younger driver. I think there's going to be some tensions with Sergio Perez. Again, it's not the biggest, flashiest lineup in the world. But we're kind of, in my head, thinking 2021, 2022. We're still growing. We're just becoming a big team. Taking a gamble on youth, making sure we've got that experience, not only in Formula One, but with the team in Sergio Perez. I think we've got a strong lineup there. And our reserve driver, let's go with Ooh, who can we steal from Formula 2, Formula 3? Let's go with Jack Aitken. I mean, he's just been signed up to Williams as their test and reserve driver for 2020. I think probably not ready for a Formula 1 seat, but definitely if we needed him to step in the car, he could do a good enough job. So, yeah, I'm happy with that lineup. But yes, it is the audience participation question, so I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've got questions for next week's episode, of course, Twitter, Instagram, you know the drill by now. Comments below, it's straightforward. Thank you for watching. If you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, feel free to do so. I hope you enjoyed today's weekly mailbox. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.